losing body fat, and they just wouldn't survive by themselves. So we brought them up here to keep Laura company. As I said, they're all common seals, and the easy way to tell the difference between common seals and grey seals is mainly by their size. Common seals won't get much larger than Laura, just up on the side there, whereas a grey seal can grow to a maximum of about 3 meters in length. Common seals also have more spots on their fur. Grey seals tend to be more uniformly grey. And the common seal also has a very much smaller, more compact head. A grey seal has a big broad head, a big wide snout, and parallel nostrils. A common seal has V-shaped nostrils. So there are a few ways you can tell them apart, although it is quite difficult if you don't know what you're looking for. Both seal species are members of the pinniped family, which includes walruses and sea lions. But unlike sea lions, seals cannot hold themselves up on their flippers. Sea lions have much larger flippers than seals, and they're also capable of turning those flippers underneath their bodies, so they can almost walk on their flippers. And in fact, sea lions can hunt down prey on land by running on their flippers. Seals cannot do that. You can see on land, they just sort of lumber along on their bellies like giant hairy caterpillars. They're not the most elegant of creatures, but they really are designed to be in the water. And they're torpedo-like shape, and the big powerful flippers at the rear, which they use for propulsion, means that they can swim pretty fast and catch lots of fast-moving fish like mackerel, salmon, and herring. Seals also have another very important physiological feature, and that is the layer of fat around their body. Unlike humans, it's really important for a seal to be as fat as possible, because that is what allows them to swim in very cold waters. They use that fat as insulation. They're warm-blooded creatures, they're mammals like us, and the temperature, their internal temperature has to be maintained at between 36 and 37 degrees. So they need to use this fat as insulation to keep their insides nice and warm, but they can also build up fat stores when fishing is really good, and they can use the fat as a form of stored energy. So they can get themselves through times when fish aren't so frequently caught. To help them hunt, they have excellent eyesight, both in and out the water. But because they can dive down to depths of about 500 meters, they need to be able to find their fish when the water is murky, as it often is around the shores of the UK. And to do that, they have what we call vibrissae, which are the whiskers around their face. And they use them to pick up the vibrations of fish, They use them to pick up the vibrations of fish in the water, and so they can hunt for their fish even when the water isn't crystal clear. So although they'll never leave us, Pippa, Laura and Maisie have a really important job here at the sanctuary, and that is to help us with the rehabilitation of wild seal pups that are brought into us from time to time. And we do have one seal pup in at the moment, which is in the weaning pool, and the seal hospital, which is just beyond. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that buzzing. There's a wasp trying to attack me in the face. The seal hospital, which is just past the turtles and the seahorses. You'll be able to see Chris in there. And he was found at the beginning of June on a beach in Denoli, which is not far from here. And it was actually a local vet that brought him in, and brought him in to us. He was found in a very thin and weak state. He was found very early in the year as well, so we reckon that he was possibly premature. His mother probably couldn't find enough fish to feed him because it was too early for the fish to be running properly. And he was abandoned very shortly after birth. He still had his umbilical cord when he came into us. So we know that he was only about 2 or 3 days old. And the first thing that we do when we get a seal pup in is to take him to a vet. I should mention actually, before I go on to that part, we would only ever bring a pup in here if it had been observed to have been without its mother for more than 24 hours. If you see a seal pup on the beach, it's probably fine because the mothers will leave them on the beach while they go out to hunt. And they'll come back, and just by the very act of you approaching the pup, means that if the mother sees you approach the pup, or if she can smell you on her return, she will abandon it. So it's a really good idea not to go anywhere near it, but to phone a sanctuary like us. And we would certainly go out and investigate any phone call of an abandoned pup. Again, we would only bring it back here if it was obviously ill or sick or injured or very thin. Or indeed if the mother had been observed to have been without its mother for over 24 hours. The first thing that we would do is to let our vet come and have a look and just make sure that there's nothing life-threatening wrong with the pup. And then after that we take over the role of the seal's mother. And by that I mean that we have to feed every 4 hours, even through the night, because they're only little babies and they don't have very big stomachs, and they need to do an awful lot of growing. And because we don't have access to seal milk, the best that we can do is to make something we call fish soup, which is a mixture of mashed up raw herring and a hydrating solution called zeolite. And that really is the best way to get all the vitamins and minerals and fat and protein that they need to grow up. And it's our main aim when they're very small to get them as fat as possible, as quickly as possible. Because what we don't want is for the pup to end up in our care for too long, because we are preparing those pups to be released back into the wild, so we need to put them through the rehab process as fast as possible. So the next stage after feeding the fish soup is to move them on to whole fish. And we can do that after about 3 weeks old, which is when they would wean in the wild. But they don't know what whole fish is, or even that they should, that they're supposed to be eating that as adults. So we have to show them. And we put the fish in their mouths, and we gently just push it down their throat until they start to swallow. And they soon realise that they quite like the taste of the fish, but they don't like us pushing it down there. So it doesn't take them long before they can just take a fish for themselves and swallow it down. And once they can do that, we're able then to put them in the weaning pool, because we know that we can feed them successfully, and that they will have enough fat on their bodies to keep warm in the water. So when we put them in the weaning pool, our aim there is to try and get them to take the fish out of the water. And that takes a few weeks. Chris, our resident pup, only mastered this yesterday, and he's been with us since June. So he is now taking fish for himself, which is great, because it means it won't be very long until we can move him out here with the girls. And then once we do that, all the training and interaction that you can see today will stop, and we will throw the fish in from a distance, and we'll allow the action of Pippa, and Macy of stirring up all the fish as they try to catch it. We'll show Chris that he has to chase after a fish if he wants to eat. And they very quickly learn that if they don't chase after a moving fish, they'll be hungry. So really the girls have a very vital role here, because that's something that we can't teach them, is how to compete for food. And the girls also teach them how to be proper seals. They teach them manners and etiquette, what will and will not be tolerated by other seals. And they'll teach them things like how to swim and play. Seals are very naturally gregarious animals, and seal colonies are not family groups like lions. They're just groups of seals that come together in a kind of safety in numbers mentality. So once Chris is between 35 and 40 kilos, we will be ready to release him back into the wild. Before we release him, we'll put a little tag on his rear flipper. You can just see the girls there. Pippa has just popped out, has a little green tag. Laura has a red one, and Macy also has a green one. And each tag is individual to every seal, and it's got our phone number on one side, and some details, the seal's individual ID number on the other, which corresponds to our records, so that if we were ever found again, we would get a phone call, and we would be able to say which particular seal it was, and maybe have a look and see why they had been found again. I'm very glad to say that we've rescued, rehabilitated and released over 180 seals since the sanctuary opened. We've never had that phone call. So hopefully that means that we've all done our jobs properly, and that those seal pups that we rescued are now living or have lived good lives as wild seals in a wild seal colony. I've come to the end of my talk. Does anyone have any questions? In the wild, they live for between about 15 and 20 years, but in captivity it's a lot longer because they get no predators here. We spoil them rotten, and we have a vet on hand, so if they ever get injured or sick, they'll be able to get proper treatment. So they tend to live a lot longer in captivity than the wild. Yes. Where do they sleep? Well, our seals really like this middle island here because they feel quite safe on that because nobody can get to them because there's water all around it. But they'll jump out and they'll either sleep here. They also quite like to sleep here when this pool is nice and full. We cleaned it out today, so it's just refilling. But when that pool's full, we can take this barrier away and they have the freedom of both sides, you see. So they like to sleep here too because this gets the evening sun. They just like to come out and just sunbathe for a bit. Yeah.
What plant do they have here?
Really, in the UK, it would only be orcas, which you can get up in the far north of Scotland. Yeah, that's really about it. And man, of course. So the question, what do you mean? The question is what happens when we put the male seal in? No, he would be too young. He's just a baby. Yeah. No, he won't reach maturity for about another 12 months. And we don't plan to keep him in here for very long. We just want to fatten him up, make sure he can catch fish for himself, and then he'll be off. Because the more time that we spend with him, the less chance he has of getting for a bit, and also the more attached we get to him. Yeah. No, Chris will be too young. He's only 2 months old, 2.5 months old. So we plan to get him out. He won't reach maturity until he's about 12 months rather. So hopefully he'll be gone long before then. Well, thank you very much for listening. Before you go, just 2 brief things. One, I don't know if you've heard of this ice bucket challenge thing that everybody's doing on Facebook. But our brave soldier over here, Farah, is going to take one for the team today. And Kyle has the ubiquitous pleasure of tipping a bucket of freezing cold loch water. We couldn't quite get our hands on any ice. Hang on, because I got to film this. If I don't film it, apparently it doesn't count. So if you don't want to hang about and watch, one of our team get absolutely soaked. It's Kyle's last day tomorrow, everyone. Let me just check, is this recording? Yes, it is. Okay, Farah, I leave you to your fate. Hang on, I'm just going to show the crowd here. Look at all these people pointing and waving and laughing.
My nomination, John. I'd like to nominate Tess, Kerry, and Jade.
Okay, Kyle, go.
Something under the seals is what I would do.
Well done. He's so doing good that, oh dear. Yeah. Kyle's last day tomorrow. We did have to let him have that pleasure. But we're also going to pop around and just feed